In the month of September 2006, a terrible incident occurred. Polish student Angelica Kluck, who worked in a Catholic church, was raped, beaten and stabbed to death. The maniac placed her still alive in an underground room near the altar of the temple and left her to die. There are many questions, but the main one is who was the killer and how did he embark on the path of absolute evil? The case of Angelica Kluck has become a heavy burden for the Glasgow Catholic Church. The investigation into her death uncovered a bunch of crimes that were happening in Scotland since the early 90s. In the summer of 2006, Polish student Angelica Kluck comes to Scotland to improve her English. In Glasgow, the girl made friends easily and got a job as a cleaner at a local church. The girl needed a job to finance her university education. Once the girl stopped answering her phone, concerned boyfriend of Angelica immediately contacted the police. The police declare Angela's missing and begin to gather information. Who did she communicate with during her short visit to Scotland? The suspicion was directed towards 3 men, including a 60-year-old church handyman Pet McLaughlin, who called the girl his little student. Kluck communicated with him on the day she disappeared and even helped him paint the barn. During the interrogation, the police did not notice anything strange about the suspect and released him. Just a few hours after being questioned by the police, McLaughlin disappears. A couple of days later, a photo of Pet appears in the media. The man is identified by Katie Wilson. A phone conversation changes the course of an investigation. Kate turns out to be Pet's ex-wife. The woman claims that the man in the photo is using an assumed name Pat, whose real name is Peter Tobin, and he has previously been convicted of sexual assault. At the same moment, during the search, the police found a wooden hatch measuring 28 by 18 inches. Opening the hatch, they found something that no one had expected. The hatch revealed a hidden chamber, a dark and confined space, where was Angela's dead body. The girl was tied up and had a gag in her mouth. As the expert found out, Angela was raped and beaten with a piece of wood. There were 16 stab wounds in the chest area. Seeing the nature of the injuries, the police were sure that the attacker had done this before. They were right. Let's fast forward and find out who Peter Tobin is and what crimes he committed in the past. Peter Tobin was born in 1946 in a Catholic family in Johnston, Scotland. He was the youngest of 7 kids. The boy was a bit of a handful. He started stealing at a very young age, which is why he was sent to a special school. Peter had 3 wives, but because of his penchant for violence, his marriages broke up over and over again. Peter's ex-wives told that they fell in love with a charming, well-dressed man who later revealed a sadistic side. His 3rd wife was Katie Wilson. The couple married in 1989 and had a son the same year in the 1990. Peter and Katie moved to the Scottish town of Bathgate, and in the same year, Wilson left Tobin. On August 4, 1993, Peter commits his first proven murder. He lured 14-year-old girls to his apartment, threatening them with a knife and forcing them to drink alcohol. Peter raped them. Some time later, when the victims were drunk, the perpetrator stabbed one of the girls in front of his own son. Then he turned on the gas and left the girls to die, but they both survived. Miraculously, to avoid punishment, the man changed his name and joined the religious sect of the Jesus Brotherhood. But this did not save him because he didn't change the car. Peter's car was recognized. It helped the police catch him in Brighton. On May 18, 1994, Tobin was sentenced to 14 years in prison. However, in 2004, Peter was early released. After release, he again takes an assumed name and gets a job in the church. Angelica saw Pet as a religious person. He reminded her of her father, so Angelica was very kind to him, and she paid for it. Peter and Angelica were alone at night. The maniac decides to take advantage of this. Peter attacks the girl and rapes her several times. After, he stabs her several times and hides Angelica, still alive, in the basement at the altar. Angelica died of blood loss there. Carefully examining the place, the officers realize that the body has been moved. The crime was committed not in the church but in the garage nearby. In the garage, the criminologists found many drops of blood, which form when someone has been beaten or kicked. It took for days to register every item stained with blood in the garage. By then, Tobin was in London. He tried to get lost in the big city, but he failed because he left many of his footprints in the garage and his DNA was found in the church. A big search was started all over the country and Tobin fell into a trap. When Peter was arrested, he was wearing a t-shirt stained with blood. They found the cellular material of Angelica Cook on the thing. The detainee did not confess to the murder of the girl for a long time, although the jury did not believe him, and in May 2006 Peter Tobin was sentenced to life with right to review the case after 21 years. At the time of the case, Peter was 61. However, the police did not stop. They were confused about something in this case, and they continued to carefully study the biography of the killer. They had reasons for doing so. During the investigation, an anonymous girl contacted the police. She said that a man she recognized as Tobin had once invited her to his home, where he attempted to attack her with a knife. But the girl grew up in a big family. She had many brothers, so she was able to stand up for herself. She just beat up her attacker. And imagine a man falls to his knees, starts to repent, and complains to her that he is not loved by women. Tears softened the girl, and she did not inform the police. Very wrongly. Many details about the killer became known from his first wife, Margaret. According to the woman, her first husband made her infertile, subjected her to horrific sexual abuse. In particular, Tobin stuck a serrated bread knife into her genitalia. In addition, Margaret said that Peter locked her at home and did not allow her to go anywhere without his permission. Margaret also told about another oddity of Peter, his penchant for conspiracy. From 2005 to 2006, the men changed 30 different SIM cards, registered under different names. The officer sensed something was wrong and began a detailed study of Peter Tobin's life. In November 2006, an anagram task force was created to reconstruct Peter Tobin's life as accurately as possible, and to check his possible involvement in murders in Scotland and Britain over different years. New details came out. Katie Wilson, the third wife of the killer, told a lot. Like the first wife, she and her son were kept at home. As Katie admits, her mistake was that after she ran away, she allowed Tobin to return to her life. In early 1991, she allowed her husband to spend time alone with her son Daniel. As a result, Peter took his son back to Scotland and informed Wilson that she would not see her son again. Anagram detectives decide to search all the houses where Peter Tobin once lived. The calculation was easy, since Tobin often went to jail for fraud. Maybe there was a secret place at his house that he didn't have time to hide before he was caught. It may seem incredible, but the detectives' calculation was justified. In a house in Bathgate, they find a hiding place in the attic. There was a knife. It was washed, but police find blood on it and a little piece of skin on the handle. In February 1991, 16-year-old Vicky Hamilton disappeared in Bathgate. With the help of the missing girl's mother, Vicky's DNA is restored, which matches the DNA of the material found on the knife. Thus, after more than 16 years, it becomes clear that Vicky Hamilton was killed by Peter Tobin, and it most likely happened in the man's house. Further, the search was focused on another Scottish town, Margate. Toby moved there 7 weeks after Vicky Hamilton went missing. On the 5th of August 1991, 18-year-old Dina McNichol disappeared in the Margate. The last time girl was seen alive when she and her friend were hitchhiking back from the music festival. They agreed to be picked up by a strange man. He dropped Dina's friend off at her house, but Dina never came home that evening. A search of the house that Toby rented gave nothing. Success came from where no one expected. One of Peter's neighbors remembered Tobin digging a deep hole. Search operations begin in the courtyard of the house, and in the bags they find a woman's body, dismembered in the waist area into 2 halves. However, the most important thing from these digs is that the body belongs to Vicky Hamilton, not Dina McNichol. This could only mean one thing, that Peter Tobin took the body of the girl he killed with him when moving. The body was already 4 months old. Such a strange attachment suggested thoughts of necrophilia. The remains also revealed what happened to Vicky that night. On the evening of February 10, 1991, Vicky was leaving her older sister's house in Livingston. Vicky didn't know much about the area and decided to ask Pessersby where the bus stop was. Unfortunately for her, she asked Peter Tobin. As Tobin himself later said, when he saw a young girl on the road, he decided to kill her immediately. The men offered to take the girl. Unfortunately, shivering girl agreed. He gave Vicky a hot drink laced with the drug amitriptyl, and when the girl lost the ability to resist, he very roughly raped her. Then Peter dragged the body out of the car. He drove off to a deserted area in advance. The remains were packed in plastic bags, which he later moved and buried in the yard of a house in Moorgate. However, the excavations did not end there. As it turned out, under one body in that deep hole was buried a second package with the small remains of another person. There were 18 fragments, and the examination showed they were the remains of Dina. Girl's blood was contaminated with a sedative that Tobin had been prescribed in the summer of 1991. Peter Tobin's fingerprints were found on the packages, and his minimum prison term increased to 30 years. After the second verdict, Tobin unexpectedly made sensational confessions, stating that he began killing in his youth and stopped only when serving his sentence in prison. Peter Tobin told that he had 48 murders, but details of his crime, as well as the places where he hid the bodies, the men refused to tell. In December 2009, Peter gets a third life sentence for killing Dina McNichol. The police officers from the Enneagram Task Force were haunted by Tobin's statement about the 48 murders committed, and now they are able to link him to the disappearance of 18-year-old Lisa Kay in Eastbourne in 1988. But they couldn't prove Tobin's involvement. Tobin is also suspected of murdering Jesse Earl, whose skeleton was found in the bushes of Eastbourne. As they continue to investigate the criminal's life, the police begin to suspect that Peter may be the uncaught killer, named Bible John, who killed 3 young women between 1968–1969 in Glasgow. But there are many inconsistencies in this theory. As you may remember, Tobin always buried his victims, and the biblical John always displayed them in public places. There is some visual similarity between the photo of Peter as a young man and the main drawing of the Bible John, although the Bible John is depicted with red hair, and Tobin was most likely brunette. However, all of Tobin's ex-wives said that during the menstrual cycle, he became wild, and during this period he committed sexual violence. And this is a very important point in the profile of the biblical John, because he committed all his murders when the victims were on their monthly periods. What do you think? Are the biblical John and Peter Tobin one person? Write your opinion down below. On October 8, 2022, Peter Tobin falls ill and dies in prison in Edinburgh at the age of 76. They tried to save the prisoner. He was taken to the hospital, but the men later died without confessing to all his crimes.